Commander Elias Kane stood alone in his quarters aboard the HSS Vindicator, the weight of the galaxy pressing down upon him. The room was dimly lit, the shadows playing tricks on the walls as he replayed the haunting message that had arrived through the static of interstellar space. Do not challenge the humans. You will never escape their fury. The words were garbled and distorted, as if carried by a voice both ancient and weary, yet filled with a foreboding certainty that sent a chill down his spine. Initially, Kane and his crew had dismissed the message as a mere ruse, a desperate ploy by an obscure alien race seeking to disrupt human communication channels. It seemed implausible that such a warning could hold any real significance. Yet, the universe, vast and unpredictable, was about to reveal its darker truths. The unthinkable unfolded with a suddenness that shattered the fragile peace humanity had known. The Zorth Dominion, an empire steeped in millennia of history and arrogance, unleashed their wrath upon the unsuspecting human colony of Nova Erythia. Without warning, the skies above the colony darkened, and a rain of fire descended, obliterating everything in its path. Over 2.5 million souls were lost in the inferno, their lives extinguished in a heartbeat. The news spread like wildfire through the corridors of power on Earth, each report more horrifying than the last. The Zorth attack was unprovoked, a brutal declaration of war that left humanity reeling in shock and disbelief. Grief turned to anger, and anger to a resolve that burned brighter than the fires that had consumed Nova Erythia. Fleet Command acted with decisive fury. Retaliation was not just an option, it was a necessity. Elias Kane, once a captain, found himself promoted to Commodore, his shoulders now bearing the immense responsibility of leading the counter-strike against the Zorth Dominion. As he donned his new insignia, the weight of his duty pressed heavily upon him, yet there was no room for hesitation. In the quiet moments before the storm, as Kane prepared for the impending war, the alien warning echoed in his mind, a spectral presence that refused to be silenced. He pondered its meaning, questioning whether the Zorth Dominion truly understood the depths of humanity's potential for wrath. Was the message a mere bluff, or did it hint at a hidden truth about the human spirit, a truth that even Kane himself was only beginning to grasp? As the HSS Vindicator readied for battle, Kane stood resolute, the fate of humanity resting on his decisions. The path ahead was fraught with danger and uncertainty, but one thing was clear: the Zorth Dominion would soon learn the true meaning of human fury. The silence of space was shattered by the arrival of humanity's fleet. The HSS Vindicator, a towering symbol of Earth's defiance, emerged from the void like a predator stalking its prey. Behind it, an armada of warships followed, their dark hulls glinting faintly under the cold light of distant stars. The Zorth Dominion's outer colonies lay ahead, their cities glowing faintly on the surface of alien worlds, unaware of the storm about to descend upon them. Humanity's counterattack began without warning. The first kinetic strikes rained down from orbit, massive projectiles fired with unrelenting precision. From above, it must have seemed as though the heavens themselves had turned against the Zorth. Cities that had stood for centuries crumbled in an instant, their proud spires reduced to ash and rubble. The ground quaked, and the air filled with fire and smoke, choking out the cries of the helpless below. The Zorth defenders scrambled to respond, their fleets launching from planetary docks in a desperate attempt to repel the invaders. Their ships, sleek and bristling with plasma cannons, surged forward with the confidence of an empire that had never known true defeat. But they were not prepared for what awaited them. The humans struck with a ferocity that was almost inhuman. Their railguns, silent and deadly, unleashed projectiles at unimaginable speeds, tearing through Zorth ships as though their armor was made of paper. Explosions bloomed in the void, brief and brilliant, as one Zorth vessel after another was obliterated. The humans moved with ruthless efficiency, their formations precise, their attacks relentless. There was no hesitation, no mercy. From the bridge of the HSS Vindicator, Commodore Elias Kane watched the battle unfold. His face was a mask of cold determination, his eyes fixed on the chaos outside. The Zorth had believed their plasma cannons would be enough, that their advanced technology would protect them. But they had underestimated humanity's resolve. They had underestimated the fury that burned in the hearts of those who had lost so much. Across the galaxy, alien species listened in horror as distress calls flooded the void. The messages were fragmented, filled with static and panic, but the warnings were clear. The humans do not forgive. They do not relent. Stay away. The voices of Zorth commanders, once so proud, now trembled with fear as they described the unstoppable force that was tearing through their defenses. Yet even as the Zorth Dominion reeled from the devastating attacks, humanity's vengeance was far from over. The destruction of outer colonies was only the beginning. The humans, driven by grief and anger, were determined to make the Zorth pay for every life lost on Nova Erythia. They would not stop until the Dominion itself lay in ruins. In the aftermath of each battle, the silence returned, heavy and oppressive. The shattered remains of Zorth ships drifted aimlessly through the void, their once mighty fleets reduced to debris. On the surface of the devastated colonies, the fires smoldered for days, casting an eerie glow into the alien night. The survivors, those few who had managed to escape the destruction, whispered among themselves, their voices trembling with fear. They spoke of the humans, of their unyielding wrath, and of the terrible truth they now understood: the humans were not like other species. They did not forgive. They did not relent. And somewhere, deep in the shadows of Zorth-controlled space, the message spread like a plague, carried by survivors and intercepted transmissions alike. It was a warning, a plea, and a prophecy all at once. Do not challenge the humans. You will never escape their fury. The galaxy trembled in the wake of humanity's wrath. The destruction of the Zorth colonies was not just a tragedy, it was a message. Across distant star systems, alien powers watched with growing unease as the proud and ancient Zorth Dominion faltered under the relentless assault of Earth's fleets. The Tavarian Syndicate, known for its cunning and opportunism, began broadcasting urgent warnings to its traitors and mercenaries: avoid human-controlled space. Do not provoke them. Their vengeance is absolute. The Velkern Assembly, a collective of scholars and diplomats, held emergency councils, their luminous chambers filled with a hum of debate and fear. The Velkern, who prided themselves on understanding the balance of power in the galaxy, now found themselves facing an enigma. How could a species so young, so seemingly insignificant, wield such devastating strength? The answer, whispered in hushed tones, was as chilling as it was undeniable: humanity was unlike any other. Yet, even as fear spread like wildfire, the Zorth Dominion refused to yield. Their leaders, cloaked in arrogance and blinded by centuries of dominance, dismissed humanity's victories as fleeting. They saw the humans as primitive, their technology crude, their tactics brutish. The Zorth High Council convened in their grand citadel, its crystalline walls shimmering under artificial suns, and declared that the time had come for a counteroffensive. They would rally their fleets, crush the upstart humans, and restore their empire's honor. But the Zorth had underestimated humanity once again. Primitive? Far from it. Humanity's ingenuity, forged in the crucible of survival, was now unleashed in full force. Fleet Command, driven by desperation and fury, deployed weapons that the galaxy had never seen before. Experimental platforms bristled with cutting-edge technology, their sleek forms gliding silently through the void. AI-guided torpedoes, faster and more intelligent than any Zorth defense system, hunted their targets with lethal precision. Stealth frigates, cloaked in shimmering layers of advanced material, slipped past enemy lines like ghosts, striking without warning and vanishing into the darkness. At the heart of this storm was Commander Elias Kane, now a man transformed by the horrors of war. The lines on his face told stories of battles fought and lives lost, but his eyes burned with an unyielding resolve. Leading his fleet deeper into Zorth territory, Kane became a symbol of humanity's defiance. His presence on the battlefield was like a shadow, silent, relentless, and unstoppable. The Zorth counteroffensive began with boldness, their fleets surging forward in massive formations, plasma cannons blazing with the confidence of an empire that had ruled the stars for millennia. But their arrogance would be their undoing. Humanity struck back with a precision and ferocity that shattered their illusions of superiority. The experimental weapons platforms unleashed storms of hypersonic projectiles, tearing through Zorth's ships as if they were made of glass. The AI-guided torpedoes danced through the chaos, weaving past defenses and detonating with devastating force. And the stealth frigates, invisible to Zorth's scanners, infiltrated their ranks, sowing confusion and destruction before disappearing into the void. As the battles raged, the galaxy watched in stunned silence. The Tavarian Syndicate began withdrawing its fleets from contested zones, unwilling to risk provoking humanity's fury. The Velkern assemblies sent emissaries to Earth, their messages cautious and diplomatic, seeking to understand the humans rather than challenge them. Even species that had once viewed humanity as inconsequential now hesitated, their leaders whispering among themselves about the terrifying potential of this rising power. But for humanity, the war was far from over. Commander Kane pressed deeper into Zorth space, his fleet carving a path of destruction that left no doubt about humanity's capabilities. The Zorth Dominion, once so proud, now faced a grim reality of their arrogance. Their counteroffensive was crumbling, their fleets scattered, and their colonies falling one by one. In the cold silence of the void, a new truth began to take shape, a truth that would echo across the stars for generations to come. Humanity was not to be underestimated. Their vengeance was not a fleeting storm but a relentless tide, sweeping away all who dared to challenge them. And as Commander Elias Kane led his fleet into the heart of Zorth territory, the galaxy held its breath, waiting to see just how far humanity's wrath would reach. The skies over Zorth Prime burned with the fury of war. The capital world of the Zorth Dominion, once a beacon of their galactic might, now trembled under humanity's relentless assault. From orbit, the human fleets loomed like harbingers of doom, their dark hulls casting shadows over the planet's surface. The air was thick with tension, the silence of space broken only by the distant echoes of explosions and the ominous hum of engines preparing for the final strike. Humanity's vengeance had reached its peak. Orbital platforms, once the pride of Zorth engineering, crumbled under the unyielding barrage of railgun fire. Shield generators, glowing faintly with the Dominion's last hope of defense, shattered in bursts of light as kinetic strikes tore through them. The skies above Zorth Prime were a chaotic dance of fire and debris, as the remnants of Zorth's defenses fell like dying stars. On the surface, the Zorth leadership gathered in desperation within their grand citadel, a structure that had stood for millennia as a symbol of their empire's unshakable power. Its crystalline spires, which once sparkled under the light of twin suns, now seemed fragile and dim, overshadowed by the looming threat above. The High Council, faces pale, and voices trembling, sent envoys into the void, their ships streaking away from the planet like desperate prayers. They carried messages of surrender, pleas for mercy, promises of peace. But the humans did not answer. On the bridge of the HSS Vindicator, Commodore Elias Kane stood like a statue, his posture rigid, his gaze fixed on the dying world below. The weight of countless battles had hardened him, but there was no satisfaction in his expression, only grim determination. The Zorth Dominion had taken too much, destroyed too many lives, and now they would pay the price. As the envoy's pleas echoed across the COMM channels, Kane's voice cut through the static, cold, and unyielding. All batteries, fire. Asterisk. The command was followed by silence, a moment suspended in time, before humanity's wrath was unleashed. The bombardment began with a thunderous roar that seemed to shake the very fabric of space. From the fleet above, railguns fired in synchronized precision, their projectiles streaking through the atmosphere like meteors. Kinetic strikes rained down upon the surface, each impact shaking the ground and sending towers aflame into the sky. The planet's military installations, once impenetrable fortresses, were obliterated in seconds. Firestorms swept across the land, consuming everything in their path: bases, factories, and the remnants of Zorth's once proud armies. The Citadel, the heart of Zorth Prime, was not spared. The humans targeted it with ruthless precision, their strikes tearing through its crystalline walls and igniting its core. The spires crumbled, falling like shards of glass into the inferno below. The High Council, their cries of despair drowned out by the chaos around them, vanished into the flames, their legacy reduced to ash. From orbit, the devastation was absolute. The surface of Zorth Prime, once vibrant with alien life and culture, was now a wasteland of fire and ruin. The twin suns cast a pale light over the smoking remains, their warmth unable to pierce the cold silence of death. The Zorth Dominion, an empire that had ruled the stars for centuries, was no more. For the humans, there was no triumph in this victory, only the quiet, somber realization that they had done what was necessary. On the bridge of the HSS Vindicator, Commodore Kane turned away from the view screen, his expression unreadable. The war was over, but the cost had been immeasurable. Humanity had shown the galaxy its strength, its resilience, and its wrath. But as the fleets began their withdrawal, leaving behind the smoldering remains of Zorth Prime, one truth lingered in the void: the humans had not fought for glory or conquest. They had fought for survival, for justice, and for the memory of those they had lost. And the galaxy, watching in silence, would never forget. The galaxy was no longer the same. The Zorth Dominion, once an unshakable symbol of power and dominance, had fallen. Its mighty fleets lay scattered, its proud cities reduced to rubble, and its people silenced by the weight of their defeat. What remained of their empire drifted aimlessly in the void, serving as a grim warning to all who dared to challenge humanity. Across the stars, alien civilizations watched in horror, their confidence shattered and their carefully woven strategies unraveling under the crushing truth: humanity had risen, and nothing could stand in their way. Fear spread like wildfire among the alien empires. In the grand halls of their councils and the fortified chambers of their war rooms, whispers of dread echoed. Trade routes that had thrived for centuries were abandoned overnight, their once busy lanes now eerily silent. Merchant ships, once brimming with goods, were grounded in fear of encountering humanity's wrath. On the edges of human-controlled space, colonies were hastily evacuated, their inhabitants fleeing with whatever they could carry. Entire fleets were repositioned, no longer focused on exploration or expansion but on defense against the shadow of a predator that had claimed the galaxy as its hunting ground. But humanity was far from content with victory. The fires of vengeance burned brighter than ever, consuming any notion of restraint. Fleet Command, emboldened by their triumph, declared a new campaign, a campaign not of defense, but of domination. Preemptive strikes were launched against alien powers suspected of aiding the Zorth Dominion. Proof was irrelevant, suspicion was enough to justify destruction. Leading this relentless offensive was Commodore Kane, a name now whispered in terror across countless worlds. His reputation as a ruthless tactician had transformed him into the embodiment of humanity's fury. The raids were merciless. Supply depots, once bustling hubs of activity, were reduced to smoldering ruins in mere hours. Shipyards, vital to the construction of alien fleets, were obliterated before they could complete their work, leaving skeletal remains of unfinished vessels drifting lifelessly in the void. Communication relays, the fragile threads that connected distant worlds and held alliances together, were systematically severed, plunging entire regions into chaos and isolation. Humanity struck with precision, leaving nothing but devastation in their wake. The galaxy reeled under the weight of humanity's wrath. Alien leaders, desperate to find a way to survive, convened in secret meetings. Their voices trembled as they debated their options. Some argued for appeasement, proposing to send envoys with offerings of peace and tribute in hopes of placating the unstoppable force. Others, driven by pride or desperation, prepared their fleets for war, knowing full well the cost of defying humanity. Yet, regardless of their choices, one truth haunted them all: humanity was no longer the prey. They had become the predators, and the galaxy was their hunting ground. As Commodore Kane's fleet moved from system to system, leaving destruction in its wake, the galaxy watched in silent despair. Worlds that had once thrived with life and prosperity now lived in the shadow of fear. The stars themselves seemed to dim under the weight of humanity's ascension. Alien civilizations that had once looked upon humanity as a curious anomaly now saw them as an unstoppable force, forged by fire, blood, and an unyielding will to survive. Humanity's rise was not just a story of vengeance, it was a declaration. They were no longer the fragile species struggling to find their place in the vastness of space. They were the storm, the predator, the force that would reshape the galaxy forever. And as alien empires scrambled to adapt, one undeniable truth echoed across the stars: the age of humanity had begun. The galaxy was aflame with whispers of fear and desperation. For centuries, the alien powers had regarded humanity as a curious anomaly, a species with potential but little threat. Yet, as the years passed, that perception began to shift. Humanity's rapid technological advancements, their unyielding resilience, and their growing presence among the stars had become impossible to ignore. What once seemed like a distant ember now burned like a wildfire, threatening to consume everything in its path. The fear became unbearable. Across the galaxy, ancient rivalries that had spanned millennia were cast aside in the face of a common enemy. Blood feuds that had defined entire civilizations were forgotten, and alliances that once seemed impossible were forged in desperation. The Velkern Assembly, known for their wisdom and diplomacy, extended a hand to the Tavarian Syndicate, a faction infamous for their cunning and ruthlessness. These two powers, once bitter enemies, became the cornerstone of the Coalition of Preservation, a massive alliance united by a single, desperate goal: to contain humanity before it consumed them all. The Coalition's fleets were a sight to behold, a gathering of power and diversity unmatched in the galaxy's history. Thousands of ships, each bearing the distinct mark of its creators, converged in a display of strength that sent ripples of awe and terror through the stars. The sleek and shimmering vessels of the Velkern, their hulls like liquid silver, glided alongside the jagged, predatory warships of the Tavarians, bristling with weapons. Massive carriers and dreadnoughts from other alien factions joined the ranks, their designs as varied as the species that built them. It was a force born of desperation, a tidal wave of vengeance and fear, poised to strike at the heart of humanity. And strike they did. The Coalition launched a coordinated offensive, their fleets moving with grim determination. They believed their overwhelming numbers would crush humanity in a single, decisive blow. Wave after wave of ships surged toward human space, their engines burning like torches against the void. The galaxy held its breath, waiting for the inevitable clash. But humanity was ready. At the heart of their defense stood Commodore Kane, a man whose name had become legend. No longer the idealistic officer of his youth, Kane was now a hardened warrior, his mind sharpened by the fires of countless battles. His name alone was enough to send shivers through the most hardened alien commanders. Kane had been tasked with holding the Arcturus line, a critical choke point that shielded Earth and its colonies from invasion. If the coalition broke through, humanity would fall. The battles at the Arcturus line were unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Kane's tactics were brutal, unorthodox, and devastatingly effective. He used the terrain of space itself as a weapon, turning asteroid fields and nebulae into death traps. Coalition fleets, bloated with confidence, charged into human-controlled space, only to find themselves ensnared in Kane's traps. Ambushes struck like lightning from the darkness, human ships appearing from the shadows to unleash destruction before vanishing into the void. The coalition's vast numbers, once their greatest strength, became a liability. In the chaos of Kane's ambushes, their formations crumbled. Ships collided, their captains blinded by panic and confusion. The humans fought like predators, stalking their prey with a cold, calculated ferocity. Hit-and-run tactics became their signature, each strike precise and devastating. Supply lines were severed, leaving entire coalition fleets stranded and vulnerable. Desperation began to seep into the coalition's ranks. Alien commanders, once confident in their overwhelming power, now found themselves overwhelmed by fear. Frantic warnings echoed across their fleets, *, do not challenge the humans. They fight like predators. *, these words, spoken in desperation, spread like wildfire. Panic took root, and the coalition's unity began to fracture. The Arcturus line became a graveyard for the coalition's ambitions. The void was littered with the wreckage of alien warships, their once proud hulls now broken and lifeless. The debris fields stretched for light years, a silent testament to humanity's strength and the coalition's folly. For every victory the coalition claimed, humanity inflicted 10 defeats. The morale of the alien forces crumbled as the grim truth became undeniable: humanity could not be contained. Commodore Kane stood on the bridge of his flagship, his expression unreadable as he watched the remnants of the coalition's fleets retreat into the darkness. The battle was over, but the war was far from won. Kane knew the galaxy would never stop fearing humanity. The coalition might regroup, or new enemies might rise, but it no longer mattered. Humanity had ascended, and there was no turning back. The galaxy, once vast and unknowable, now seemed smaller. Every star, every world, felt within humanity's reach. The coalition's failure had proven one thing: humanity was no longer just another species among the stars. They had become something far more dangerous. Something unstoppable. And as the coalition fled, their ships vanishing into the void, one thought lingered in the minds of all who had witnessed the carnage: *, do not challenge the humans. You will never escape their fury. The Arcturus gauntlet stretched out like a deadly corridor, a graveyard of jagged asteroid fields and unpredictable gravity wells. It was a place where even the bravest navigators hesitated, their skills tested to the limit. But for the coalition, this treacherous path was their last hope. Over 500 capital ships, the pride of alien engineering, advanced together in perfect synchronization. Their hulls gleamed under the distant starlight, their weapons primed and ready. This was their final gamble, a desperate attempt to break through humanity's defenses and strike at the heart of human space. On board the alien ships, a heavy silence hung in the air. Crews moved with grim determination, their faces etched with the weight of their mission. They knew the risks, but they had no choice. The coalition had poured everything into this assault: their most advanced technology, their greatest minds, and their most seasoned commanders. Victory seemed possible, even within their grasp. And yet, beneath the surface of their resolve, a quiet fear lingered. It was a shadow that had grown darker with every defeat, every battle lost to humanity's relentless ascent. As the fleet entered the gauntlet, the silence of the void became suffocating. The asteroids drifted lazily, their surfaces scarred by ancient impacts. Gravity wells shimmered like mirages, warping space, and creating deadly traps for the unwary. The coalition ships moved cautiously, their tight formation a display of discipline and unity. They believed they were prepared for anything. But they did not know they were being watched. Hidden among the shadows of the asteroids, humanity lay in wait. Their ships, cloaked in silence, were predators ready to strike. Commodore Kane, the man who had masterminded countless victories, stood on the bridge of his flagship. His gaze was cold, his expression unreadable. He had studied the coalition's every move, predicted their desperation, and chosen this battlefield with ruthless precision. The gauntlet, a place the aliens had hoped would lead them to salvation, was instead a carefully laid trap. It would become their grave. The ambush began without warning. From the darkness, human railguns erupted in a symphony of destruction, their projectiles tearing through the coalition's leading ships with deadly accuracy. Torpedoes streaked across the void, their fiery trails marking the path of death. Plasma mines, hidden among the asteroids, exploded in blinding flashes of light, ripping apart entire sections of the fleet and sending shockwaves through the formation. The coalition's ranks crumbled in an instant. Ships collided in their frantic attempts to evade the onslaught, their once perfect formation dissolving into chaos. Commanders shouted desperate orders, their voices filled with panic as they tried to regain control. But it was no use. The gauntlet, which had seemed so manageable moments before, now turned against them. Asteroids, propelled by the force of explosions, crashed into fleeing ships, crushing them like insects. Humanity's assault was relentless. Their ships moved with terrifying precision, weaving through the chaos like wolves hunting a scattered flock. Alien vessels, no matter how advanced or well-armed, were no match for the humans' ferocity and coordination. Fires raged across the coalition's warships, their proud emblems obscured by smoke and debris. Survivors could only watch in horror as their comrades were torn apart, their hopes of victory obliterated. At the center of it all stood Commodore Kane, his voice calm and commanding as he directed his forces. Every strike, every maneuver was calculated to maximize destruction and confusion. There was no hesitation, no mercy. The coalition had chosen this fight, and now they would pay the price for their arrogance. Kane's orders cut through the chaos like a blade, ensuring that no opportunity to crush the enemy was missed. The battle was over almost as quickly as it had begun. What had been intended as the coalition's final stand became a massacre. The wreckage of their fleet drifted lifelessly among the asteroids, their once mighty ships reduced to smoldering ruins. The few survivors, their vessels battered and broken, fled into the void, their retreat marked by desperation and fear. As they fled, their transmissions carried a single, chilling message across the stars: "Do not challenge the humans. Their fury knows no end." The words spread like wildfire, reaching every corner of the galaxy. They were not just a warning, they were a declaration of humanity's unrelenting power. The coalition, once the galaxy's symbol of unity and strength, had been utterly destroyed. And as the surviving ships disappeared into the darkness, the gauntlet returned to silence. Its asteroids drifted once more in the stillness of space, bearing silent witness to the fury that had unfolded there. Humanity had not simply won the battle, they had claimed their place as the galaxy's apex predator. The stars themselves seemed to dim in mourning for the lives lost and the empires shattered. But for humanity, there was no mourning. There was only the cold certainty that they had done what was necessary to survive. In the quiet that followed, the galaxy understood a truth it could no longer deny: humanity's fury was endless, and their dominion over the stars had only just begun. The Arcturus gauntlet, once a symbol of hope for the coalition, now stood as a graveyard, a testament to what happened when the galaxy underestimated humanity. And in the hearts of those who survived, a warning burned brighter than ever: asterisk, do not challenge the humans. You will never escape their fury, asterisk. The galaxy lay in an eerie silence, its vastness no longer alive with the vibrant hum of trade routes or the proud declarations of alien empires. Once, there had been unity, a unity born not of trust or cooperation, but of shared arrogance and power. Now, that unity was shattered, replaced by a suffocating fear that gripped every corner of the stars. The coalition, the galaxy's final hope to resist humanity's rise, had been utterly destroyed. Its mighty fleets were now nothing more than debris drifting in the endless void, its leaders either slain or hiding in the shadows of forgotten worlds. In the emptiness left behind, humanity stood alone, a towering shadow that loomed over every planet, every species, every soul. Across alien worlds, stories traveled faster than light itself. They spread in whispers, carried by trembling voices in marketplaces and council chambers, told by survivors who had seen the unthinkable. These tales painted a picture of humanity's wrath, of their relentless aggression and unyielding strength. Commodore Kane's name became a legend, a ghost that haunted the dreams of alien leaders and commanders alike. They spoke of battles where human ships emerged from the darkness like predators, striking with terrifying precision and leaving only destruction in their wake. They told of entire fleets consumed by fire, of planets abandoned in fear, and of once great civilizations brought to their knees. Desperation gripped the galaxy. From every corner, envoys were sent to humanity's domain, their ships trembling as they crossed into the shadow of human-controlled space. These diplomats came bearing gifts, precious resources, artifacts, anything of value. They came with words of peace, with desperate promises of non-aggression, their voices quivering as they pleaded for mercy. But humanity's response was cold and unyielding. There were no assurances, no treaties of peace. Humanity had been forged in the fires of war, shaped by the cruelty of a galaxy that had sought to destroy them. And now, that same galaxy would live with the consequences. On the bridge of his flagship, Commodore Kane stood alone, gazing out at the endless expanse of stars. The light of distant suns reflected in his eyes, but his expression was heavy, burdened by the weight of victory. He had led humanity through the fires of war, had seen the cost of every decision, every battle. The faces of the fallen haunted him, both human and alien. The price of humanity's ascension had been steep, and Kane bore the weight of it on his shoulders. Humanity was no longer the same. The war had stripped them of their innocence, their dreams of peaceful exploration. They had become something darker, something feared. The galaxy's warnings echoed in Kane's mind: asterisk, do not challenge the humans. You will never escape their fury. Asterisk, these words, spoken in fear, were true. Humanity had become predators, their instincts sharpened by desperation and survival. They had learned to strike first, to strike hard, and to never hesitate. It was a lesson the galaxy would not soon forget. But Kane knew a deeper truth, one the galaxy refused to acknowledge. Humanity's transformation had not been their choice. It had been forced upon them by a galaxy that saw them as weak, unworthy of respect or survival. The coalition and its allies had sought to crush humanity, to erase them from existence. In doing so, they had created their own worst nightmare. The predator they feared had been born from their own arrogance. Now, the galaxy trembled beneath humanity's shadow. Yet Kane understood the nature of sentient beings. Fear, no matter how deep, could fade. Memories grew faint, lessons were forgotten, and the desire for rebellion always found a way to spark anew. One day, perhaps not soon but inevitably, the galaxy would forget. They would rebuild their fleets, whisper of resistance, and dream of defiance. Cain knew this as surely as he knew the stars themselves. And on that day, humanity would remind them of the lesson they had taught the galaxy. His gaze hardened as he stared into the endless void. If the aliens ever forgot what humanity had become, if they ever dared to challenge them again, humanity would answer. They would remind the galaxy in fire and steel. The stars themselves would burn before humanity allowed itself to be threatened once more. The galaxy was forever changed, but so too was humanity. Gone were the explorers, the dreamers who had once reached for the stars with hope and wonder. In their place stood warriors, forged in the crucible of survival, predators in a universe that had taught them to hunt. As the stars continued their silent dance, the galaxy watched and waited, knowing that humanity's fury was a storm that could rise again at any moment. And in the quiet corners of the universe, where whispers of rebellion might one day grow louder, the warning would remain, a warning etched into the hearts of all who had witnessed humanity's rise. Do not challenge the humans. You will never escape their fury.